The year 2026 marks the definitive end of cheap, globally traded fossil fuels. A collision curve, driven by Persian Gulf conflict and the massive electricity demands of generative AI, now threatens traditional digital infrastructure. Hyperscalers increasingly view the conventional utility grid as a point of failure due to price volatility and security risks. In response, the tech sector is pivoting toward domestic, carbon-free, and islanded power. This shift aims to insulate core assets from global commercial risks rather than just reducing carbon footprints. Key strategies include deploying small modular reactors, SMRs, and reallocating capital to geographic safe harbors along the Atlantic coastline to ensure energy sovereignty. The narrative begins with a stark visual of the three primary global computing hubs: Northern Virginia, Frankfurt, and Tokyo. These regions represent the nervous system of the modern economy, yet they are increasingly vulnerable to distant shocks. The focus shifts to the title, The Choke Point and the Cloud: Navigating the 2026 Hormuz Crisis and the Future of AI Infrastructure. The analysis identifies a fundamental disconnect between the digital and physical worlds. While cloud computing feels ethereal and weightless, it relies on a massive physical footprint of data centers that consume more electricity than many mid-sized nations. In 2026, the vulnerability of this footprint is exposed as never before. The Strait of Hormuz, a 21-mile-wide passage, becomes the site where the exponential growth of silicon meets the hard limits of carbon-based energy logistics. The evidence suggests that the AI boom is not just a software revolution, it is an industrial power struggle. As the world moves toward 2030, the cloud is being forced to ground itself in sovereign energy generation. This slide sets the stage for a world where the ability to generate electrons at home is as critical as the ability to design GPUs in the lab. The situation in early 2026 is described as a geopolitical shockwave. Approximately 20% of the world's oil and liquefied natural gas, LNG, is suddenly stranded by the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. This is not a temporary dip, it is a systemic collapse of the energy artery that fuels the global economy. The report highlights three critical pillars of this crisis. Geopolitical shock. The closure is the result of Operation Epic Fury, a joint military strike that has paralyzed Persian Gulf exports. Grid and price squeeze. Surging natural gas prices collide with AI's projected 1,000-plus terawatt-hour power demand. This combination destroys existing data center operating expense, OPEX models. The sovereignty mandate, a mandatory shift toward behind-the-meter, BTM microgrids, rapid renewable deployment, and small modular reactors, SMRs, is now required to island compute capacity. The implication is clear. The era of relying on the public grid for massive AI workloads is over. The ratepayer protection pledges mentioned later in the analysis indicate that tech giants can no longer expect the public to subsidize their energy-hungry expansions. The future belongs to those who own their power generation. The focus narrows to the geography of the crisis. The Strait of Hormuz is the exit for 20 million barrels of crude oil every single day, representing roughly 20 to 25% of global seaborne trade. Even more critical for the electricity sector is the 20% of global LNG, primarily from Qatar and the UAE, that is now entirely frozen. The data shows an instantaneous collapse of tanker transits. Within 48 hours of the start of Operation Epic Fury, traffic dropped by 70% as shipping companies and insurers pulled back in fear of drone and missile strikes. The 21-mile gap is no longer just a shipping lane. It is a strategic choke point that has effectively disconnected the world's most productive energy region from its most power-hungry industries. The crisis is as much a financial one as it is a military one. The narrative explores how commercial risk has been weaponized. Military strikes are only half the story. The other half is the reaction of the insurance and shipping markets. War risk premiums have spiked by 50% in the opening days of the conflict. The market shockwave is quantified through the Hormuz ship transits per day metric, which fell from an average of 153 to a mere 13. This is not just a reduction in supply. It is a halt in commerce. Brent crude. Prices surged past the $100 to $120 per barrel range almost immediately. EU gas futures. The price of natural gas in Europe climbed by 70% between February and March 2026. The analysis notes that insurers have begun canceling coverage entirely for the Persian Gulf, making it impossible for commercial fleets to operate, even if they were willing to risk the drones. This systemic failure of the commercial logistics chain is what ultimately forces the hand of the AI industry. When you cannot ensure the fuel that powers your grid, you must find a fuel that does not need to transit a war zone. The unstoppable force is the AI data center electricity consumption curve. The report contrasts the 460 terawatt-hour consumed in 2022 with the projected 1,000-plus terawatt-hour for 2026. This exponential growth is meeting the broken supply chain of natural gas reliability. The global electricity generation by source table illustrates the precariousness of the situation. Natural gas historically provides about 22 to 25% of global power. In 2026, its reliability and affordability have collapsed. Coal remains a fallback for many regions, including China and India, but faces severe environmental and logistical hurdles. Renewables growing steadily but struggling to match the sheer speed of AI demand growth. The collision curve is the point where the rising demand for electricity for AI training and inference crosses the falling availability of affordable natural gas. This intersection is the primary driver of the massive shift toward nuclear and localized renewable microgrids. The analysis suggests that the organizations that fail to navigate this curve will face catastrophic operational failures by late 2026. The report delves into the macro dependency of the electricity sector on natural gas. In the United States, natural gas fires approximately 40% of electricity. When global gas prices surge due to the Hormuz closure, those costs bleed directly into domestic retail electricity rates. Data centers are uniquely exposed because energy represents a massive portion of their total cost. The analysis presents the concept of margin compression. Macro exposure. Surging utility costs are no longer being absorbed by the public. Ratepayer protection pledges. Tech giants, under political pressure, have signed pledges to foot the bill for their own utility upgrades and inflation. Skyrocketing utility costs. The result is a direct hit to the bottom line for compute-heavy companies. The evidence indicates that the knowledge economy is built on a foundation of cheap power that no longer exists. The shift toward on-site generation is therefore not just a strategic choice, but a financial necessity to prevent operating margins from being entirely consumed by fuel price contagion. The crisis is not limited to the West or Asia. The narrative examines the Middle East itself: Iraq, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the UAE. These nations were positioning themselves as the new hubs for global AI infrastructure through their massive sovereign wealth funds. The conflict has caused investment paralysis. Middle Eastern sovereign wealth funds are being dragged into the regional conflict, forcing a reassessment and potential pullback of global AI investments previously slated for the region. Projects that were seen as the future of the Silicon Gulf are now on indefinite hold as capital flees to safer geographic harbors. The analysis suggests that this pullback creates a vacuum in the global AI landscape, further accelerating the movement of compute capacity toward the Atlantic coast and the North American interior, where energy security can be guaranteed. The build-out of new data centers is hitting a wall. The report identifies several choke points in the construction process. Site selection and permitting. Utilities are increasingly hesitant to approve new large load requests due to fuel cost volatility and grid instability. Grid interconnection. Wait times for transformers have skyrocketed to as much as 3 years. Hardware delivery. Critical cooling systems are severely delayed because maritime vessels are rerouting around Africa's Cape of Good Hope to avoid the Middle East conflict. The supply chain friction is quantified by the 11 gigawatt of 2026 capacity that remains under construction and is now at risk of significant delays. The analysis concludes that the time to power is now the most critical metric for any AI project. Those who rely on traditional grid interconnections are being left behind, while those who can build their own power plants on site are surging ahead. How do data center operators survive the immediate squeeze? The narrative introduces flex load strategy, a set of tactics borrowed from the cryptocurrency mining industry. By using grid-edge distributed energy resource management systems, DERMS, operators can power down non-critical AI training loads during peak grid stress. The analysis explains that AI compute is inherently flexible. Training a large language model does not require millisecond-level uptime in the same way that a banking transaction does. By flexing their load, data centers can actually become assets to the grid, earning capacity payments while protecting themselves from price spikes. This is the holy grail of demand-side management, allowing the knowledge economy to continue growing even when the grid is under extreme pressure. The strategic response to the crisis is strategic reallocation. Capital is fleeing from regions vulnerable to seaborne fossil fuel shocks and moving toward geographic safe harbors. These are regions where electrons are generated domestically, whether through renewables, nuclear, or abundant domestic natural gas, and are insulated from the Hormuz choke point. The report identifies the Atlantic pivot as a key trend. Development capital is being rerouted to regions like the U.S. East Coast, Morocco, and other Atlantic-facing nations. This is not just about finding cheap land. It is about finding unblockadable energy. The focus has shifted from global efficiency to local sovereignty. The analysis notes that the organizations that recognized this early are the ones currently securing the permits for the next generation of 24/7 carbon-free data campuses. The core philosophy of the new era is summarized. Sunshine and wind do not need to transit Hormuz. Uranium requires refueling only every 18 to 24 months. Electrons generated at home do not require tanker insurance. This slide visualizes the paradigm shift from global fragility to local sovereignty. The analysis shows that electricity as a percentage of total final energy consumption is set to explode, potentially reaching 50% or more by 2050. As the world electrifies, the source of that electricity becomes the ultimate arbiter of national and corporate power. The report contrasts the global fragility of the 20th century fossil fuel model with the local sovereignty of the 21st century electrified model. The move toward sovereign energy is described as a security imperative that transcends simple economics. It is the only way to guarantee that the lights and the servers stay on in an increasingly volatile world. Renewable energy is no longer just an ESG goal. It is a defensive strategy. The report highlights the speed to deployment as the primary advantage of solar and wind combined with storage. While a nuclear plant or an LNG terminal takes 5 to 10 years to come online, a massive solar plus storage array can be deployed in 2 to 3 years. The analysis points to bypassing the grid as a major behavior of tech giants. They are increasingly signing massive corporate power purchase agreements, PPAs, and making gigawatt-scale direct investments in localized generation. Case study: China added 430 gigawatt of renewable capacity in a single year to insulate its economy from seaborne shocks. Mechanism: direct connection to renewable assets allows data centers to lock in long-term prices and avoid the volatility of the natural gas-heavy public grid. The evidence suggests that renewables, when paired with the best technology discussed in this slide, provide the fastest bridge to energy independence for the AI industry. Nuclear energy is experiencing a dramatic revival, driven by the 24/7 baseload requirements of AI. The narrative highlights two historic market moves: AWS and Talon Energy, a $650 million sale of a nuclear-powered data center to AWS with a long-term PPA for 1,920 megawatt of carbon-free power from the Susquehanna plant. Microsoft and Constellation, reopening the 3 Mile Island facility, Unit 1, renamed the Crane Clean Energy Center exclusively for Microsoft's AI ambitions. The report introduces the concept of the islanded power connection, where a hyperscale data center is located within a security perimeter directly adjacent to an advanced reactor. Small modular reactors, SMRs, are identified as the strategic edge, offering a time-to-market monopoly for carbon-free, unblockadable, 24/7 baseload power. Unlike traditional reactors, SMRs can be manufactured in factories and deployed closer to the point of use, alleviating grid congestion and providing a closed-loop supply security model. The report provides a structured comparison of the 3 primary energy pathways available to the AI industry. The data clearly favors advanced nuclear and renewables plus storage for long-term sovereignty. The analysis emphasizes that while natural gas has been the bridge fuel, the 2026 crisis has made its volatility too high for the thin margins of scaled AI inference. The victor in this comparison is advanced nuclear for its unparalleled reliability and independence from global supply chains. The Atlantic pivot is redrawing the map of global energy and tech. The report highlights critical infrastructure projects that are creating a new energy corridor. Dakhla Atlantique, a $1.6 billion deep-water port in Morocco designed to ensure cross-border connectivity with sub-Saharan countries. Nigeria-Morocco Gas Pipeline, NMGP, a $25 billion project connecting West Africa to Europe, providing a secure, land-based and undersea coastal alternative to Middle Eastern gas. Friendshoring, the securing of critical mineral supply chains, lithium, cobalt, nickel, outside of adversarial control. The analysis notes that Japan and the U.S. are aggressively investing in mineral diplomacy in Africa to secure the raw materials required for the batteries that balance the new sovereign grid. This slide connects the dots between the physical port in Dakhla and the digital future of AI, showing that infrastructure is the new frontier of competition. The report presents the blueprint for the next decade of data center design. The 2030 islanded AI campus is no longer a consumer of the grid. It is a self-contained energy ecosystem. The campus architecture includes SMR facility, continuous, stable baseload power provided by on-site small modular reactors, solar array, integrated into the site for peak shaving and supplemental daytime power, massive battery block, BEES, for storage, grid balancing, and instantaneous backup, AI-driven DERMS, the brain of the campus, managing the energy security perimeter and optimizing compute loads in real time. The analysis concludes that this islanded model is the only way to achieve both the reliability and the carbon neutrality required by the world's most advanced technology firms. The energy security perimeter around these sites is as critical as the cybersecurity perimeter around the data. The final slide synthesizes the entire analysis into a new paradigm. The 2026 Hormuz crisis is identified as the great shattering of the illusion of cheap, stable, globally traded fossil fuels. The new mandate is stated: to sustain the exponential growth of AI, compute capacity must be strictly decoupled from seaborne energy choke points. The ultimate victor in the AI arms race will not be the company with the best algorithms, but the organization that secures domestic, clean, and islanded power generation first. The viewer is left with a final insight. The future of intelligence is tied to the future of energy. As the collision curve forces the world's hand, those who master the generation and storage of electrons at the edge will be the ones who define the next century of human progress. The research findings presented in this report demonstrate that the 2026 Hormuz crisis has served as a permanent accelerator for a trend that was already nascent: the decoupling of high-density computing from the public electrical grid. The reliance on natural gas as a dispatchable resource, once the cornerstone of data center strategy, has been proven a liability in a world of Operation Epic Fury and $120 per barrel oil. The industry's pivot toward nuclear energy, specifically the restart of existing assets and the rapid development of SMRs, represents the most significant infrastructure shift since the invention of the Internet itself. By internalizing the costs of generation and transmission, hyperscalers are not only protecting their margins, but are also stabilizing the public grid for residential users, albeit through the pressure of ratepayer protection pledges. Finally, the Atlantic pivot toward Morocco and other sovereign energy hubs illustrates a new geopolitical reality. The map of the digital world is being redrawn by the physical reality of the energy world. Organizations that fail to secure their own islanded power supply by the end of the decade will find themselves stranded in the same way the tankers are stranded in Hormuz today. Thank you very much for watching, and hope to see you soon.